Oof. The only recent game I can think of is Unreal Tournament 4, which admittedly has a pretty cool editing kit, but it's also not finished and no longer in development. I've also heard some noises that Halo Master Chief Collection for the PC might have mod tools, but I'm rather hesitant to get my hopes up for it. I believe there are two main reasons why mod tools have become so uncommon these days. The first is of course a move towards centralized servers and matchmaking, which can make modding difficult to properly support. And the second is of course microtransactions. Now I could go on for hours and hours about how microtransactions and loot boxes are just the most insidiously evil things in the entire world, but there are plenty of other people out there who can do it way better than me. No, this video has a very specific focus. I'm going to be showing all you Zoomers out there how we did it back in my day. I'm going to be giving you guys a detailed look into the process of designing and building an authentic Halo 2 map. I'll be using the exact same tools and techniques that Bungie used when they developed the original Halo trilogy. And yeah, Halo is a trilogy. Come at me, nerds. You can't fight me, I'm behind 7 VPNs right now. And one of those VPNs just so happens to be today's sponsor, NordVPN. Do you ever have one of those days where you're just trying to play some video with the boys, when all of a sudden,
You, give us your data, or we'll beat it out of you.
What? If you aren't using a VPN, this could literally be you. So why not pick up NordVPN today using the promo code Inferno+. NordVPN encrypts all of your online traffic, which protects you from hackers saying, "I'm in," as they empty your bank account in RuneScape. It also hides your internet browsing history from your ISP and even the government. Because seriously, do you really want the government to know what kind of degenerate filth you've been looking at? Like, bruh. Sign up for NordVPN today at nordvpn.com/Inferno+ and get 70% off a 3-year plan. You'll never have to worry about sailing the high seas ever again. Day 1. So of course, we start this journey just like any other, with an idea. With this project, I want to do a highly vertical, team-based multiplayer map with an aesthetic similar to Coagulation. I also wanted the layout of this map to have a mix of driving and footpaths that all intersect with each other in order to create a fun, high-energy CTF map. I drew up a rough outline of what I wanted in MS Paint, and it was pretty bad, but it was enough to get started, and as a result, I popped open 3ds Max and got to work. Now, Halo 2's game engine has a lot of weird and unique quirks to it, one of them being that level design is not done in-engine with brushes, but is instead done in traditional modeling tools like 3ds Max or Blender. This has its advantages and disadvantages, of course, but I quite like it as a whole. I find working on simple meshes like this really relaxing most of the time. So now it's time to begin modeling our map. I find the best place to start is generally to create the terrain first. This gives me a really good idea of the map's overall shape, and from there I can fill in the cliff faces and then seal the map entirely. Sealing is very important, as the map has to be a single sealed interior mesh with no open edges, duplicate triangles, or degenerate faces. Any of these kinds of errors can result in unexpected behavior or collision problems in game. Once the sealing is done, we can export the model to its proprietary .ast format and import it into Halo 2. And if you just so happen to be using the original export plugin instead of the more up-to-date one, you might just be graced with a wonderful picture of one of the Bungie employees' .ast files. Epic. After that, we just have to wait for the game engine to build the map structure in .ast format and seal the map entirely. Sealing is very important, as the map has to be a single sealed interior mesh with no open edges, duplicate triangles, or degenerate faces. Any of these kinds of errors can result in unexpected behavior or collision problems in game. Once the sealing is done, we can export the model to its proprietary .ast format and import it into Halo 2. And if you just so happen to be using the original export plugin instead of the more up-to-date one, you might just be graced with a wonderful picture of one of the Bungie employees' .ast files. Epic. After that, we just have to wait for the game engine to build the map structure and then calculate lighting. Once that's finished, we can finally open up the map editor and... oh. It's a bit smaller than I expected. No problem though, just scale it up a little bit, export, structure, light, and... and perfect. Or, well, functional, I guess. it isn't much to look at right now, but just about every map will start out like this. A completely barren and haphazardly textured shape of some kind. Day 2. Now with the basic shape of the map done, we need to start filling in the detail. And what better way to add detail than just throwing rocks and trees randomly all over the place? And by randomly, I of course mean very deliberately. The placement of the rocks and trees in this map will both act as cover, line of sight breaks, and even stepping stones to allow players to climb up the cliffs in specific places. After distributing the rocks and trees, I also felt like it was time to try and draw up a ground texture for the map. Ground textures in Halo are another interesting quirk of the game that I think deserves its own explanation. So for an example, here is the ground texture for coagulation. As you can see, it's a rather small texture at only 512 pixels squared, but it's used for the entire canyon. The way this works is that the ground texture is actually blended with multiple other grayscale detail textures, with the alpha channel of the ground texture acting as a mask to interpolate between the different detail textures. The result of this is that you get the color of the ground texture mixed into the tile detail textures, creating a rather nice looking effect that is very efficient to render. The downside of this is that I'm absolutely fucking terrible at painting textures. Though I guess that's only a downside if you're me. So with that explanation out of the way, here's my ground texture. It sure is a valid TIF file. After finishing up that tragedy, it was time to create some bases. I played around with a few different ideas, but eventually decided to do a sort of Forerunner containment wall type thing. Now, Forerunner architecture is a super interesting topic with tons of different styles and approaches, but I'm not even remotely qualified to speak on that. I am not an expert 3D modeler, and it has always just been a fun thing I did in my spare time. So I can't really comment on that. My approach to Forerunner geometry is 45-degree angles and extrusions. So epic. So I put together this pretty decent looking Forerunner wall, and then decided that instead of having ramps or ladders on the back, I'd have gravity lifts, because gravity lifts are cool. I also put together a simple flag stand design that I decided to put out in the open in front of the base. I felt like it would be a good idea to separate the flag stand and the team spawn area, as it can be a little bit messy when you have those two things too close together. And with that done, I exported the map again, and, well, it's definitely starting to take shape, but it's got a long way to go still. Day 3. So right off the bat, I decided to redesign the gravity lifts and the flag stand. The ones I had created before just did not look good and were not really functional either because of the shape, so it was a high priority for me to fix them. The new ones I made were much better, like a massive improvement, and I was much happier with those. Next up, I decided to add an actual physical cliff top to the map. This doesn't really serve much of a purpose, but I feel like it makes the map have a better sense of space. I also added a small facade of an upper cliff face as well. It's a small detail, but it's something that's commonly done in a lot of the original Halo 2 maps, so I decided to do it too for authenticity's sake. After that, I decided I really wanted a central structure in the map, something that would both fill the space and create symmetry, as well as acting as a line of sight break between the two bases. Once again, I did a few terrible drawings to kind of get an idea of what I wanted, and then decided to do a giant monolith type thing. It's a very simple structure, but honestly I think it makes a big difference in how the map is played. It acts as a solid choke point between the two bases, and of course it breaks line of sight, which is incredibly important. After that, I decided I really wanted to design a man cannon for each base, but honestly I was so burned out for that night that I gave up after making a few terrible attempts. Instead of that, I just added my boy Jelly Elite to the map, and called it a night. Run, my banana. You must go fast. Day 4. Picking up right from where I left off, I managed to create a man cannon that I didn't immediately hate the design of, and I put one at each base, pointing towards roughly the center of the map. After that, I went ahead and added a small bridge on the far side of the map, roughly where these man cannons land. These two changes really help with the overall flow of the map, and prevent the game from being bottlenecked right around the spawn areas. It's also important to note that while this bridge is just wide enough for a player to walk over, you cannot consistently get a vehicle over it. After I finished that up, I went ahead and added a few little detail structures around. These are entirely for flavor, and they really don't serve any particular purpose. And continuing with this trend of aesthetics, I went ahead and added some random plants and foliage in various spots as well. This fern right here, this fern is the best fern. Your fern is shit. I then set up red and blue holographic light shaders. Holographic lights are a big part of Forerunner design, and are a great way to light team bases in multiplayer maps. Color coding the bases with lights like this is an incredibly